I have among a number of things, I have a software company called Adaptive Avenue. It's a tool for web viewing, web presentation in the ad context, also in the general media context. And Lucas Johnson is an intern at the Carlson School of Management. He's been interning with me. We've been looking at various go-to-market opportunities, various implementations of this technology. And he actually came up with a very interesting idea for news media presentation in I would say the IoT or the wearable format. And we thought, hey, what a great opportunity is to bring it to this crowd, offer the concept, get some feedback, but really use it as a catalyst for generating some discussion around the format and what is the kind of the community sense, the community thinking in this realm. So like I say, I'm disappointed that Lucas couldn't be here. It's really his idea. He's got a lot of energy around it, and I really wish he'd have been here to both share the concept with you as well as hear your feedback and kind of catalyze the discussion, but I'll do the best I can. So anyway, that's big disclaimer. So the other thing is I didn't anticipate a large crowd. We thought it'd be kind of a discussion format. We were going to use a whiteboard and kind of have a whiteboard discussion, but I'll do my best to like wave my arms and frame the concept up. So I think the best thing for me to do is just kind of show you this media format, this presentation mode, and then maybe go back into some of this discussion, frame it up into the context of how does it fit in the realm of IoT, the progression of form factors, the progression of content paradigms, that sort of thing. First, maybe I can get a sense of who's familiar with or interested in IoT. And if I kind of break it down into some chunks, maybe they're artificial, but help me out in terms of, I tend to like break it into some categories like, residential, commercial, industrial, automotive, wearables. Do those categories make sense? And where are people at in that regard? Who's thinking about wearable stuff? Human interface, human scale type stuff. Who's thinking about like residential stuff, home automation? Who's thinking about like commercial, industrial? Okay, good. So really this is, to frame things up, this is really in the realm of wearables, or I call it human scale stuff that's actually on our body, touching our body. And human factors and human interface technology is really reaching a kind of a threshold at this point once we start to put it on our bodies and touch our bodies with it. Who saw Mike Bollinger's presentation, by the way? Yeah, smartwatch. Yeah, I was outside the hall as well. Anyway, Mike did a great job of framing up, the context, the progression through stages of human interface and what happens when you get to this point of the human interface is actually at the human now. This microphone I'm holding, it's got a human interface, but it's really not even touching me. I mean, I'm touching it with my hand. We touch our phones with our hands, we touch our keyboards, that sort of thing. But when we get to wearables like, attached to our bodies, strapped to our bodies, that's really moving to a different level. It's a lot more personal interaction and interface. So anyway, I'll just show you this thing, and it's, by the way, not only is it framed up in the context of it's a wearable, but it's in a particular category, or what I'd call vertical of wearable, which we haven't really seen any movement in that area as we see some of the early applications in smartwatch, that sort of thing. And again, just interested in any feedback, that you guys have for us, but also stimulating some discussion around, hey, what are going to be the, I don't think we know yet what the applications are going to be at the wearable level, that sort of thing. So anyway, let's hope that the presentation that Lucas sent me runs flawlessly like he promised me it would. So by the way, he's calling it the Avenue. I mentioned that the platform I've built is called Adaptive Avenue. The once and future tagline was, the next generation of web presentation isn't an information superhighway, it's an adaptive avenue. Anybody remember the term information superhighway? It's an old term, but the idea of the adaptive avenue is a much more customized, personalized experience, much more granular content. And as you may have noticed, there's this kind of, I would almost call it a concerted or a coevolution process of not only form factors, as they get smaller and smaller and more granular, and we have many more computers, but than we used to have, but they're much, much smaller. Content's doing the same thing. Does anybody ever notice that concept? Is the content's also getting broken down into much smaller pieces, and these two trends are kind of converging, or reinforcing, co-creating, whatever the case. Okay, so he calls this particular application of Adaptive Avenue the Avenue. Again, it's a newsreader application. And we'll go through the progression. So we go from mobile to smartwatch application. Again, we know that it's a form factor change. Once we go to the wristwatch format, it's a fundamental shift. And we're showing that this would be an icon on the watch. Oops, what did I do wrong here? Oh, okay. So he's showing us like an actual login, which we could have a login to the app, and then we're going to go through the progression from the watch as really a notification station. Oh, wow! Thanks for heads up. Let's see what happened here. Oh, okay, just testing me. So has anyone heard the concept of notification paradigm in the context of content for wearables? So as we process content at this level, we're going to use content differently. It's going to be a different type of content, different form of content. So one of the key transitions that happens when we go to, from pulling out our phones and looking at our phones is, well, it's two things really. It's the size, of the form factor that's available to me, and the time that I'm going to spend observing that interface. So I might look at my watch for 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, whatever. But when we put our wrist up, we're going to do it for shorter periods of time. However, it's also a much more frequent activity. And in fact, that's an interesting point that Mike made in his earlier presentation, is the idea that when the technology is on our body, when it's on the surface of our body, it's much more accessible. And that's a key user interface aspect, is to recognize the fact that this is technology that's a lot more accessible to us. We're going to flip our wrist and look at what's on our wrist a lot more frequently and a lot more easily than we're going to go to our phone, lug it out, and look at that interface. And so that's one of the pieces we're mindful of. And the reason we're calling this notification station is a paradigm we're starting to hear in the content realm is the notification paradigm. So there's a lot of content paradigms out there. We've gone from web pages to things like feeds. Remember RSS news feeds. We've got posts. We've got vines or segments, audio/video segments. We've got the card paradigm. Who's familiar with the card paradigm? Anybody familiar with it at all? Check it out. It's interesting. A lot of content on the web, and again, more tailored towards more granular content, like on mobile and even ultimately on wearable technologies, being framed up in smaller units called cards. And again, another content paradigm that's relevant to these smaller and more granular form factors. And the notification paradigm is like that. And we're starting to see some sort of collaboration or consensus around that paradigm as the unit of measurement, the unit of content development in the wearable realm. So we're calling it notification station, and it's basically that we're not going to be viewing web pages. We're going to be getting notifications, small staccato units of information, very frequent but very small. Also, indirect attention. Don't assume direct attention. Don't assume focused attention. The other thing we're showing here is the integration. Once we get to the smaller form factor, we know that we can only access so much information. Now there's a unique opportunity there to reach out to us, and because we can view the wearable much more frequently, it's much more accessible. There's an opportunity to kind of penetrate our consciousness, our activity much more deeply, but at the same time we get less attention. So a key factor in moving towards the wearable will be to integrate with other media, other form factors. So a key factor in the smartwatch is integrating with mobile, tablet, and also with the PC and desktop realm. And that's going to be a key factor for any application. So here we're showing, well, you can get a notification, you can get an indication of some kind, and then you can dig deeper by going to the PC or the desktop. And then we're showing also the notion of blend, which is really capable of both functions or going back and forth and integrating those capabilities. Let's see what else we want to talk about here. Okay, so we could ask, well, gee, why do I keep losing? I wonder what's happening here. One sec. Huh, now I can't wiggle it back into existence. Try unplugging, replugging. Well, we're just about to get to the really cool part here, too. I just scrolled ahead. Huh, that's bizarre. There we go, okay. So again, typical news media engagement is a lot longer. A lot of the news sites, believe it or not, the average viewing time is it's really only a couple minutes, which doesn't seem very long, but that's a long time in terms of viewing. In the case of, what am I doing wrong here? It's not like the machine is timing out. Okay, maybe I have to keep touching it or something. Anyway, in the case of news on the wristwatch, we might say that it's not the same paradigm as typical web viewing or even mobile viewing, tablet viewing, but we think there is an opportunity there. That, in fact, because a lot of times we like to get news in short staccato bursts, that the wristwatch is an ideal application of it, because that's how the wristwatch is designed. That's what the smart phone is doing. Is a lot of the applications we're seeing take root are those short, quick, frequent staccato interactions. So why wouldn't news be a good application? So now I'll show you an example, if I can get the power to stay on. Example of how we'd actually work through. So here's an example. Oops. I keep checking it. I don't know if it's, who's the engineer in the bunch? Who knows where that's going? This seems to be tight. This seems to be tight. Huh. I don't get it. Okay, now, what do I do? Maybe I'll just, seems to be related to me standing here for some reason. Okay, maybe I'll stand here, even though I'd rather just be out in front there with you guys. Okay, so here's an example of an alert that might come on our wristwatch smartphone, wristwatch newsreader. So we're getting a case of, fire in so and so, and we see this image, and it might be interesting to us. If it's not interesting to us, it'll go away in a couple seconds, but it's going to give us the headline: building fire in New York. Wow, I don't know what to say here. We're just about to get to the interesting part too. Okay, so then it displays the headline, building fire in New York, leaves 22 injured. And now what we're going to do is, as we gradually watch the wristwatch move toward our eye, is this piece called transparency. Is the article will gradually become more visible. So again, this isn't something we've seen in smartwatch interactions. Is the notion? Imagine if, as you move the watch, and again, maybe we're talking science fiction. Maybe we need to get into some of the calibration technologies that are used. But we envision that if not immediately available, will be available in not too distant future. That as we move the smartwatch closer and farther from our eye or from our head or from our face, that it can actually change based on the context that's behind it. So in this case, the idea was, from a UX perspective, we're putting a teaser out there when it's down here at our wrist, and then as we gradually, if it catches our eye, if it doesn't catch our eye, it goes away. And then if it does catch our eye, as we gradually move it toward our face, we get more and more information, and the notion that you can use transparency as a vehicle as well, and that the text behind the image would gradually become more opaque as we moved it closer and closer to the face. Yeah, go ahead.
That effect really,
Sure.
lots of the things that are notifications when it's down here would be very bombastic, very just in your face, trying to get your attention kinds of things, right? And then becoming more subtle as you bring it in, which is, it leads to some interesting scenarios where you might have some really annoying notifications.
So, perfect, good. And so we recognize those aspects. B, we want to get the feedback, and C, we still ask, is there some middle ground? So for example, newsreaders are getting better and better at figuring out, well, what are we interested in? So first of all, A, I can opt in or out. I can turn the thing on or off. But B, I can also train the newsreader to get better and better about the kinds of things that interest me. For example, it can sense, and this is what we're doing with the biometrics, is it can sense better the articles that if I moved my wrist because I indicated interest, then it knows I was interested in that article. Now granted, it might be a function of time of day or circumstances of life or that sort of thing, but we're still thinking that we would be able to train it to some degree to not intrude upon us with irrelevant material, but bring to our attention relevant material. And obviously that's the holy grail, and that's one of the challenges we'd be facing. Is that the kind of issue you're getting to? Is how do I not get annoyed with?
I just look at it I look at it from the perspective that our phones and our laptops and our television and even our watches, anything that can be used to get a piece of our minds, in terms of people trying to disseminate their information or ads or whatever. It's when you're buying into a platform that is putting these micro limitations on your wrist, and some of those are going to be not things that you want, just like on your phone, there's some stuff on your phone that you don't want to see because it's ads or whatever, within apps. And the same thing is going to be true here. It's just interesting to think about what that's going to mean for, I don't know.
No, exactly. That's exactly the discussion, and it's the broad discussion. It's there's somewhere in the middle between nothing and everything is the happy medium. If we do want to get, it's kind of like advertising. It's like, well, certain things we actually appreciate. A notification, that's relevant, it's interesting to me, that sort of thing, and a lot of it's just noise. And how do we get, so is the point that we don't want intrusion, or is the point that we want to learn to filter the signal from the noise, And I want to be careful not to lose the signal from the noise in that message, because I think the point is that we all absolutely want to filter signal from noise, but it doesn't mean we don't want to get notified of certain things. And by the way, the question I'm raising, and we're offering for hypothesis is, well, would news be anything different than any of these other types of notifications, especially given, where news is at these days. I mean, we're just, with aggregators out there that are pulling news from multiple places and that are forming news and forming content into bite-sized pieces, aggregating it and mashing it up, that sort of thing. And also, shoot, what's the other thing about news? well, some of the social aspects of news that we want to, be up to date on certain, developments. We may want to follow certain stories, that sort of thing. So again, just offering, the hypothesis, or forming the hypothesis that if we're willing to be notified under certain circumstances, whether it's that the cake is done cooking in the oven or whatever the case may be, is news also one of those applications? And we're not really seeing it yet. And I guess we're wondering, well, is it yet to come? Is it going to take some push to get it out there? Are there some constraints that are factors that are keeping it from happening? But I think those are all good points, and they're the dimensions that kind of frame the discussion. Is we definitely want to separate signal from noise, but we're thinking there is some middle ground where we do want to get notified of certain things, and how can we get to that middle ground? Oh, the other point I wanted to make is, and it's going back to a couple of the points Mike made in his presentation, is because it's so close to the body, because the smartwatch is so close to the body, and it's so easy. It's a significant difference than pulling the phone from the pocket. And don't underestimate how huge a difference that is in UX. That's like 2 or 3 clicks, the difference. And because and that's both an advantage and a disadvantage, but it makes information much more accessible. But the other thing it actually creates an opportunity, forms a platform for us to fine tune and better adjust that signal to noise ratio, because it's so easy to just turn your wrist and indicate interest or no interest, that we can better gather that information to form the signal to noise ratio around whatever the application might be, or whatever the content might be. Other thoughts or questions, disagreement, thinking along those lines? Is it annoying? I guess, what do you want to be notified of? Who wants a smartwatch? Any thoughts around that area? What do you think's a great? What's the best smartwatch application you've seen so far? Okay. Okay. And is that like a twice-a-day thing, once when you're leaving, once when you're coming back? Okay. Obviously, you don't want to be notified of every bus every day during the day, right? Okay. Now, so great application, right? What a great application. And again, it's that signal to noise ratio of either you specifically training the watch, or the watch learning that you're not interested in all those times between 7:30 in the morning and 5:30 at night or whatever, but you are interested in the 3 buses around this particular time and the 3 buses around that particular time. And I would suggest that we can do the same training in like lots of other applications, and let's just be thinking about, well, what are the other areas where I wouldn't mind being notified? And in fact, if I could be notified in a trained way, it would actually be valuable to me. It would actually be, more benefit than pain. So. Yeah, it's close.
Sure, it's attached to your body, it's on your body, right? But I mean, that interface is happening with your body without you even doing anything consciously, right? Just the fact that it's picking up data from you. I think that is really the next. I mean, I'm not obviously saying anything new here. I'm saying that, but I think that there's going to be some really interesting applications of that.
And it's certainly a category, and I think I think it's helpful to think of these things in categories, and that I'm thinking Mike might have had a term for it, but it's sort of the passive. Oh, he had 3 C's. I can't remember what they are now, but that would almost be the consolidation or the gathering of data more than the interactive. You might gather that data, but then all you do is upload it to your tablet and view it on your tablet or that sort of thing. But there are other activities, other behaviors that will actually be interacting with that device because it's there, and the idea that it's there and we're interacting with it, it's taking a layer of behavior out of the similar activities that we do on our smartphone. It's just, by definition, we know we've got a smaller area, we've got a smaller period of time frame, and we've got a less we're going to do it less frequently, and by the way, more indirect attention. Now, going to the other end of the spectrum, can you think of so like you said, and very, very good point. I think all these nuances are good to kind of make explicit. Do you think about, so just as you mentioned, turning our wrist or bringing our wrist up to our face, up to our eye, is something. It's not as much as pulling the phone out of our pocket, but it's something. Can you think of an interface that's even less than the smartwatch? Back up just a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Google Glass. So now we're at the two ends of the spectrum, aren't we? So Google Glass, that was virtually no interaction at all. It's like move my eyeballs, look up there, right? And again, this is the kind of conversation that we wanted to frame. Is if you look at smartphone at one end of the spectrum, Google Glass on the other end of the spectrum, and then put smartwatch in the middle. Where smartwatch is, it takes more effort. It's less effort than smartwatch, more effort than Google Glass. And where's it going to fit in terms of that functionality, and what are the benefits, relative advantages, and what kind of applications will find a landing place at that platform. So thoughts about what happened with Google Glass? Obviously it was v1.0, but thoughts on the first take, the first act? Okay.
Conversely, a watch fits in just fine without any of that interactivity.
You're absolutely right. It's not an uncomfortable addition or or at least it's some positive augmentation of behavior.
Or it's style. Just come out and say it. I mean, that's one of the big things. Like this is stylish. The big bulky thing is not.
It's unobtrusive.
So again, those are some categories and some great distinctions. It was less obtrusive for us, the wearer, but it was actually more, it was a social issue, which, again, did they anticipate? I mean, maybe they did,
I think it was less obtrusive in the action for you to receive the interactive information, but a lot more intrusive in how that was delivered to you. You were forced to not.
True. There you go again. And so how do we get, and is that the next generation, how do we get the best of both worlds? Because we're talking about, well, smartwatch, I still have to lift my wrist, I still have to turn my wrist, I still have to look down there, and we're saying, well, Google Glass, I don't need to have to look, but it's there. Well, how do we get to, and I'm going to form the hypothesis, I think UX can do it, is how do I get to the golden mean? How do I get to the happy medium, which is it's less intrusive in terms of the action I have to take to get the information, but it's also less intrusive in forcing itself on me.
I think the next steps in battery miniaturization, which you're hearing a lot about in the news recently, like it's getting smaller and faster to charge and all that stuff. And then, display technology. If it was in an apparatus that really completely resembled typical eyeglasses, like it would be a lot more adopted. It'd be definitely right.
Well, I think it's less about the actual hardware and the medium and more about the type of content that they wanted to deliver. And the
Now let's ask, is that a, sorry for the volume, is that a transitional issue or is that an inherent, issue? Is that just a matter of, it's kind of like, well, the Google Glass, we haven't figured out the right combo. Likewise with training your Pebble to notify you, and it's probably more of a software thing than a hardware thing, but is that just a matter of training? Would you just figure out what's interesting to me? Would you go by talk about having a past behavior, talk about applying machine learning. It's like, well, you have my past behavior, don't you know what, interests me and what doesn't interest me? Sorry.
I think it's both, because it's forcing us to mold our behavior and change our behavior, which I think
Okay.
is a lot more difficult than designing an intuitive platform to give me information.
So that wouldn't exactly be user-centric, would it? To force us to mold our behavior.
The resources to put that together. Pebble versus Google, right? Pebble doesn't have the back-end infrastructure
No,
to intelligently make those decisions.
I think it was the smartest move for Pebble to come out one ahead with the awareness that it did, because it basically, it was the cheapest use case, test case for Google or Apple to see engage interest in the next big platform. Sure.
Go back to the battery thing. I'm not sure I quite tracked you on how the battery will affect the adoption.
I'm just talking about the hardware in general.
Okay.
It still seems obtrusive. I really think it does, and I think that's the people who really bore it a lot were just the diehard early, cutting edge early adopters. And I just don't think you're going to see a mainstream adoption of that particular set of hardware that is available right now. Like if it looks and feels like typical eyewear, then it's going to be a lot more popular. It's going to catch on. That's just the hardware side of it. Yeah.
Well, and notice we've talked really about three dimensions, from a product design perspective. We've talked about A, how intrusive it is socially, to the folks outside of us. B, how intrusive it is to us in an undesirable way, that it's there when I don't want it to be there. It's forcing itself to, it's forcing me to give it attention when I don't want to give it attention. But then the third factor is it's intrusive in a positive way because very little effort to go there when I want to go there, and if only it would know when I want to see what I want to see, which I think is a solvable problem, but we don't tend to solve those things in V1 products, and so, it's how do we go through the adoption curve and, get further along. Go ahead.
Curious question about the learning side of it. So a lot of times you hear about trying to figure out, okay, this is the topics set that I'm interested in, but there's also the time and the location. If I'm
Exactly.
going to look at the news, it's going to be when I get home, I'm going to go look at things, I'm going to listen to it on the radio or different things like that. There's a specific location, a specific time. How much of that is really tied into the learning when at the broader sense that people are looking at?
Yeah.
Or is it just a topic?
Great. These are great questions. So when you think about, and this is why I mentioned machine learning and the things we're doing with machine learning and large data sets to learn customer behavior. Well, think about trying to understand, like I've done a little, work in the machine learning side, very little, but over at Best Buy, trying to understand that vast customer base. Well, think about it. Your watch only has one customer to learn. This is a very definable machine learning problem. Now, granted, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's a very narrow problem, and the reason I kind of lit up to the notion of the bus stop thing is actually I should have been more explicit is the notion of, well, alert me when the bus is coming is exactly learn that kind of behavior of when I'm interested in getting the news. It's like notice when, learn my behavior. You can learn my behavior that when I'm, in mid-morning meetings at 10:30, I'm not checking the news. Even though you gave me an alert, would you learn that I didn't check it? Now, by the way, it's 5:30, I'm on my commute, or I shouldn't be looking at my watch while I'm driving or whatever, but would you learn that behavior? Would you learn the time frames, when I'm actually paying attention? And I also want to emphasize the aspect of what I would call implicit training. I don't want to have to tell the watch, I don't want to have to turn it on first of all and go and say, now start giving me news alerts. And I don't even want to have to tell it, give me news alerts between 7 and 9 a.m. and 5 and 7 p.m. I don't want to have to say that. I want the watch to learn itself. A parallel comes to mind is programmable thermometers. Who has a programmable thermometer? So it annoys the heck out of me because it's like that's not user-centric. It's like it's programmed to, it heats up when I'm, I have to tell it what time I'm going to get up, as if I get up at the same time every day. Does anyone get up at the same time every day? I don't. But anyway, so I have to tell it what, I give it this 2-hour window of when it's going to crank up the heat and it's going to be a little warmer, then it's going to turn it down, then it's going to like turn it back up again, versus would you just, either would you observe my behaviors, or would you sense me walking in the room, or would you sense me approaching, would you sense me leaving work or whatever, versus this notion of I have to tell you what time to turn on it. See, that's not learning, I don't think. I'm talking about a deeper learning where I'm not telling you what to do, because that's not really, learning, that's just programming. But am I getting to your point, or?
Yeah, so I'm curious, what are all the different factors that time, location? If I'm at home, that's one thing I'm interested in. Now if I'm at somebody else's house, or if I'm at
All those, yes, yes, yes. All those, and why wouldn't you? And what would be the limitation? Is there really a limitation on sensing that? I mean, well, can it hear? Can it hear voices? Can it know? I have friends who, for one reason, I think of a friend who, when he calls me and I answer the phone, he says, "Are you at home?" And I say yes. He says, "Are you alone?" And I say yes. I think it's because one time I had a conversation with him when he had me on the speakerphone and his wife was listening, and it wasn't like it was. It was anything particularly compromising, but I wished I hadn't been on the speakerphone, or I wished I had known I was on the speakerphone. And so for some reason, I don't know if he thinks I'm going to trick him or what. But anyway, point saying, he says, "Are you home?" Yes. "Are you alone?" Yes. Okay, so the watch could sense human voices, right? I mean, it can make a distinction between a television or a radio and real human voices, right? So isn't that information it could use to program the behavior? Absolutely yes. And I would say the number of variables, the framework that comes to mind for me, does everyone know the music genome, Pandora's music genome? So how many genes on a musical chromosome?
I don't know the details about it.
Okay.
It does a really good job.
120, I think. Now, somewhere in that number, 120, 100, something like that. So basically, it's not infinite, and I'm going to say it's not even 120. Just because it's not two variables, doesn't mean it's not a solvable problem. And I would say we don't need 120 to get to a level that would satisfy the kind of context that you're talking about. I think it would take maybe 8 to 10 to 12 at most, and then we would have a very responsive, I guess, environment, And to me, that's the essence of user-centric design. Is it responding to me, and is it trying to understand me, versus am I conforming to its behavior? And I think that was a real interesting point, by the way, that you brought out, that some of this stuff comes out. And it may be the V1.0 factor, but some of it may be just, poor design, not user-centric design, not design-first type mentality, which, the mindset is, no, we're going to shape you, to this behavior. And the interesting thing about the wearables is we get closer and closer. That's why it's interesting to juxtapose the concept of human factors, which is another term for UX or, UI or human computer interfaces or whatever, converging with the human interface, i.e. actually being on our skin, is it's emphasizing all these issues, and it's going to be both. It's going to be both those forces in play versus, both the force of, because it's so hard to be on our skin, on our surface, without imposing on us, and without shaping our behavior, that there will be a temptation to cut some of those corners and just, hey, you user, deal with it, because I can't be on your wrist and have long battery life and not heat up. Well, guess what? You're going to figure that. You're not going to heat up, and you're going to have a long battery life, and you're going to be on my skin. You're going to figure that out. Now, on the other hand, there's tremendous opportunity to solve UX problems that we've never ever gotten close to solving, because we haven't, the UX pressure hasn't been as intense as once we get to the user interface, and particularly when we get to, as we get to smaller and smaller devices, when we get to not just stuff that's on our shoes or in our cars or in our smart homes or that, but stuff that we're actually wearing. But interesting discussion. Oh, by the way, just thoughts on, back to Google Glass. Any ideas when they'll come out with V2? Or maybe it's known, I don't know. I don't know. Anybody know?
I bet they'll have V2 the minute there's a V2 version of like the Apple Watch.
That was my other thing. Oh, wait, of the Apple Watch? Oh,
Whenever there's large kind of backing behind the idea that we should be actually, that wearables are becoming a better towards the society as well.
okay. So do you think anyone else is going to come out with a version of Google Glass
Absolutely.
before Google does? Before Google does V2?
Yep.
Okay. Who?
Oculus will be a great example.
Okay.
Expansion of VR.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. How about Amazon? Qualcomm. Okay. Motorola? Samsung?
There's a lot of opportunity in the commercial and industrial market supporting field services, for example. Someone's out there working on an oil rig. You need to know how to connect the two pipes together. Just show a video of that. That's actually something that was done on Google Glass. There's a big enough market out there outside of just consumer apps.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting comment on sort of adoption cycles and that sort of thing. And in a way, we could ask ourselves, well, why didn't it find application in industrial applications, first? Or if the space program were what it once, been, that might have been a place where some of these, technologies would have found first use. Does Google Glass have any residual applications in industrial, contexts at all? Still? I mean,
I would think so. There's probably a form factor issue. It's not an industrial strength
right,
product.
right.
But if you could make them more, there's certainly a use for it. You have instant, let me pull up a video on this, let me pull up some additional information instead of having to call somebody or walk back to the car and pull out a tablet and figure out how to get internet out there.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, that's something we look at a company that makes industrial testing, and our guys have their smartphones with them. That's what they do. So they have their multimeter in one hand, they got their smartphone in the other. They use their nose to scroll, and they're looking to see, okay, I need a voltage here. Is this? So if we could somehow get that to the point where they can wear their personal protective equipment, and it becomes seamless. So always with industrial, you get into process and safety that's probably why Google Glass didn't have any traction there.
Sure, good. Makes sense, yeah. Interesting. So what about a smartwatch application? May not be ready yet for the glass application, but wouldn't it be a lot more effective to use a wearable than a smartphone? You'd have two hands if nothing else, right?
The reason the guys are using smartphones is because they have them.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
it's so much better than not having anything or having the manual, which is really where the problem comes. Because they got a 5-pound manual they got to thumb through. Yeah, and the other thing that's happening with industrial equipment is the amount of information these guys have to process is going up exponentially. 20 years ago, they had a multimeter. It took one number. Now they've got 15. They're all wireless. They have a lot more information to process.
You need a flexible platform. You can't have a hardwired, you need a programmable, device, a diverse device. Well, let me ask you, what do you think of, who uses news apps at all? Desktop, laptop, tablet? What do you think, smartphone? Use a smartphone app? What app? Flipboard, cool. I got a whole story about Flipboard. What do you use? Google News, okay, all right. What do you think of a smartwatch news app?
I'm addicted to news, so I probably use it like crazy.
If it was hyper-curated to exactly what I wanted to see and delivered to me at a time where I was most receptive to see it, like I'm saying, coins of information, yeah.
Do you think Flipboard is effective at curating your news?
Very.
Okay.
I trained it well, I think.
So if Flipboard had a smartwatch application, would it be interesting to you?
I think it would be more interesting to me, given the medium and how it was delivered, to remind me of something I may be interested in doing, and then send that or do that to me.
And
Where it's more comfortable to actually engage in that.
right, exactly. So going back to the principles of, at the smartwatch, we're not going to be doing the whole medium there. It's going to have to be an integrated medium across multiple platforms. And in fact, the main function, and I think I show here somewhere, the main function might just be pulling things up that are happening because we're so real time these days. We're so, everything is granular, hyper-granular, it's in the moment, it's real time. And we might want to be catching that news, but it's almost like TiVo or whatever. I want to store it for later, but I want to get the notification now because it's happening now, but I want to, store it for later. I think we had something in here along those lines. Let's see, what did my, oh yeah, so here, we're showing typical flip phone applications, like you could flip through. I'm about done with the projector anyway. But the idea that you could flip through news on the wristwatch, but you really wouldn't want to probably spend much time doing that. But you might want to you might want to have that combination of a real granular format. So as news gets more and more granular, both unit-wise, content-wise, and time-wise, why not give me that more granular form factor? And I think the three of those, as you're thinking about UX and you think about all these, we've talked about some categories and dimensions, but I think those are three dimensions to kind of be coordinating: is A, the form factor, B, the content paradigm, and C, the interval or the time, factor. And it's like, well, if news is getting more granular, both in time and in content format, why wouldn't I want to get more granular about it in, form factor? Now, as a subtlety, then, what do you think of this notion? And I'm just curious, it's the earliest germ of an idea, but what do you think of this notion of, have you seen anything like, the behavior will change as I move the watch? What have you seen along those lines, where it might get more, it might be transparent down here, and as I bring it up to my eye, it gets more opaque? Oh, so have you seen anything?
Any physical examples? I think Apple Watch is only example is that it's non-active until you bring it up to your face.
I mean, these tablets, they know if you're looking at them, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can tell if you're looking at them. That's the start of it.
Do you really want to limit yourself to the full movement? If we're looking at how do I limit that movement, 3 clicks versus just glance at it, is there a way to catch the glance versus the let me check?
Absolutely. Excuse me. Sorry. Absolutely. And I think again, that's a user adaptation thing of, I should be able to choose. I should be able to choose to flicking my wrist, both how much action does it take and then what happens when I take the action. So, for example, I might want to program it so that it shows me full transparency, while it's way down here. Or I might want to say, well, a slight flick of the wrist starts to show it. Or I might, I might put it everywhere in between. And, the point is there's once you start to embrace the concept, then we can break it down into those increments, as much as much as we want. And I think it makes sense to A, provide those options, but B, I'd really like the device to actually learn them, so after maybe 5 interactions, would it please learn that it might not do it after the first one, but would it please learn that when I want to see an article, all I do is flip my wrist, versus if I want to see an article, I'm going to bring it all the way up here, and then, by the way, don't, if I just flick my wrist, then don't bring it all the way up or show it to me, or whatever the case may be. Interesting. Okay, good. I appreciate the feedback. I think that was probably about what we had to cover. Again, a couple of the main ideas being, as it gets closer to the interface, the human interface issues become much more intense. But by the way, at this very intimate level, where we have smaller space, smaller intervals, that it's really going to be key. We can't think about this interface anymore as a standalone interface. It's going to be connected to all the other parts, and it's going to take some intelligence, not only to understand our behavior, but to understand how to communicate with those other other devices, and when to send stuff to my phone, and when to just let that article go. Oh, that was kind of interesting, but I don't want to see it later, or that sort of thing. But anyway, it's an interesting frontier. Have fun on all your various journeys. Thanks for your patience and feedback. And like I say, sorry that Lucas wasn't here to show you his thing and get your input. But anyway, any other questions or thoughts? Or You know, probably not Apple Watch. I think, I don't know, I'm actually I'll probably talk to Mike Bollinger and see what he's thinking, and I might actually talk to him about trying to prototype something along these lines. Again, it's very early. You know, we've been looking at a news app that does something that no other news apps do, which, by the way, you might be an interesting subject user for us or give us some input, but you don't see news apps that rotate content continuously, or if they do, they're using our technology. But and we're actually starting to see, like, I think Facebook Paper maybe does something along those lines. Flipboard recently went to the web. They actually went to the web a couple years ago, and they tried to use the flip paradigm, and it really didn't work for them. And so now they've gone to the web, and they're using what I would call a scroll paradigm, but it's a manual scroll. And I want to see an automated scroll. And so that's really how we got here, is we're looking at a new, like I mentioned, Adaptive Avenue is a web presentation platform. It basically plays sequences of web pages in automated fashion. And so we're looking at, well, why don't we play, for example, RSS feeds, like that, rather than having to manually point and click and advance through articles, that sort of thing. Obviously, highly curated. Don't give me stuff that's not interested to me. But anyway, that's how we got into this realm. And so now we're thinking about, well, there's going to be a whole debate around what will the operating system for the watch be, for example. And I know I tend to land on the side of, I think we're in transition. The notion of the native app on the smartphone is a transition to ultimately, and I think we're seeing some signals, but it kind of comes and goes. But I personally think we're headed back towards mobile browser, and a lot of, granted, we can't get some of the pixel perfect graphics, and we got some latency issues and that sort of thing. But I think there's an increasing opportunity for mobile browser, and I think we'll have the same question on the smartwatch. So we'd be looking at, well, is there an application for that kind of technology, that kind of rotational technology on the smartwatch? Again, because it's not a dedicated viewing experience, maybe not, but it's something we thought about that has, maybe it has a niche, just like anything else. How about you? You gonna get us an iWatch, or? Jury's still out? Okay, yeah, get one on eBay. Anybody else? Yeah, he has to do it. Okay. What is the battery life? Okay. And so what, you have to take it off and plug it into the wall? Is that the deal? You take it off at night?
It's like 12 hours if I'm looking at,
Okay. Well, what do you guys think of, where's Google in the space? What do you think of Google in the wearables realm, in the iWatch space? Any thoughts or? Interesting. Okay, great. That's a very interesting, concept. So you like Android better than iOS?
I like the glances of Android, but then again, I haven't seen much from Apple yet, aside from their video.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. Are you guys mobile developers or?
Hobbyish.
Okay.
Enthusiast.
Enthusiast? All right. Raving enthusiast, passionate enthusiast, semi-passionate enthusiast. How about you guys? Developers or? Product? What kind of products?
Navigation for trucks.
Okay. Pentair or no?
ALK.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, some interesting applications there. So, cool. All right. Thanks a lot.